Hello everyone! In this lesson we will learn about the famous loop in WordPress. Before we worry about what that means, let's first give ourselves a goal. So let's imagine that on the home page of our website, we want to output our most recent blog posts. Now before we dig into any code, let's first make sure that we have more than one blog post to work with. So let's jump over to our admin dashboard, and from the sidebar, let's click on Posts. So at the moment, I just have the one single Hello World demo post, but let's go ahead and create a few dummy posts right now, just so we have multiple posts to work with. So for the title, let's just say test post, and then you can just type out a bit of gibberish or paste in some lorem ipsum, doesn't matter, but go ahead and click publish. And why don't we create at least one more dummy post? So add new, I will call it second test post, add a bit of dummy content, and go ahead and publish again. Okay, so now if I click on posts from the admin sidebar, you can see that I have 3 posts. So now we can go ahead and learn how to output those blog posts onto our home page here. Let's go ahead and jump over to our text editor program. And in our theme folder's index.php file, let's delete all of this test code from our previous lesson. Okay, so we've got a clean slate. Let's go ahead and jump into PHP mode. And then let's create a while loop. Okay, so the word while, and then a pair of parentheses. And then right after that, a pair of curly brackets. Okay, so this is our empty skeleton of a while loop. And now, remember in our previous lesson, we had to do all sorts of things like create a count variable and manually increment that count, and then come up with our own logic like if count is less than a certain number. Well, this time around, we don't have to do any of that. We are no longer trying to work with hypothetical lists of names. Now we are trying to work with real WordPress content. And WordPress gives us the exact tools and functions to do that without breaking a sweat. So within the while loop parentheses here, all we need to do is use a special WordPress function named have_posts. And remember, to call or run a function, you include a pair of parentheses. So forget about programming. This almost makes sense just from an everyday English standpoint. How many times do we want to repeat or run this loop? Well, keep looping as long as or while we still have posts to loop through. Okay, and then within the curly brackets, what do we want to do once for each blog post? Well, before we try to output the title or the content of a post, first we need to call a WordPress function named the_post. This is a WordPress function that we can call and leverage, and it does several important things for us. Remember in our previous lesson we had that count variable? Well, we don't need to do that now because this the_post function will keep track of which post we are currently working with. So each time our while loop runs, this the_post function will tell WordPress to get all of the relevant information about the next post ready for us to use. So check this out. Right after this the post and then a semicolon, why don't we drop out of PHP, and then on this line where we are closing the curly bracket, let's drop back into PHP. And what this does is now in between those two lines where my cursor is now, we are still within the while loop, but now we are in HTML mode. So let's go ahead and create a heading level 2 HTML element. And inside the headline, if I say hello and then save this and refresh, we see 3 hellos because we have 3 blog posts. Now obviously it's not very useful to just say hello. Instead, we probably want to output the title of each blog post. Now watch how easy this is. In between the headline, let's drop into PHP. And now we can use a WordPress function that is conveniently named the_title. Okay, so we just call this function. Let's save this and refresh. Cool, we've got the title for each post. Next, let's try to output the body content for each post right below the title. So back in our code, underneath this H2, let's just drop down to a new line. And I want to call a PHP function, so let's go back into PHP mode. And you might be able to guess the name of the function that we want to run. Its name is the_content. Semicolon. Okay, and then maybe right below this line, why don't we add an HTML horizontal rule just to create some sort of visual separation between each of the 3 posts. In the real world, we would use CSS to accomplish that, but this is a quick and dirty solution. So let's save this. Looks good. Let's give ourselves another goal. Let's imagine that whenever we click on one of the headlines, we want to be taken to a details screen for just that one single particular post. So if we want to turn the headlines into links, if you've ever worked with HTML before, you know that we just want to wrap this content here in A tags. Okay, so right before the title, let's open up an HTML A tag. And then right after the title gets output, let's close that A tag. Okay, and then in HTML, you give the opening A tag an attribute named href. And this tells the web browser where it should go when someone clicks on the link. So the question becomes, what do we want to type within these quotes? What URL do we want to send the visitor to? Well, you might have guessed it, but WordPress has a function that will output the perfect URL here. So within the quotes, let's drop into PHP, and then let's call a function named the_perm, as in permanent, permalink. Parentheses, because we're calling the function. Okay, let's go ahead and save this and test it out. Cool, so the headlines look like links, and if I click on this first one, I'm taken to a screen with only that one single post, and more importantly, notice the URL up here in the address bar. WordPress automatically knows what data to query from the database based on the URL that we visit. Right? So this is the permalink or slug for second blog post. So WordPress knows to fetch or query just that post from its database. Back on the home page, when we are simply at fictionaluniversity.dev, in this case, by default, WordPress will query or fetch your 10 most recent posts when you're on the home page. But if we go to one of these detail screens for just a single blog post, WordPress will see the permalink or slug in the URL. It will only fetch or query that one post. And that way, when we try to loop over all of the current posts, there will only be one single post to loop through. Okay, let's give ourselves another goal now that we are on this single detail screen for just one post. For example, it doesn't make much sense for this headline to still be a link, right? Because we are already on the detail screen for this post. There's no reason to click this again. So the question becomes, how do we let that remain a link while we are on the home page, while removing the link once we get to a single detail page? Well, check this out. Back in our text editor, I want you to create a brand new file in our theme folder. So new file, let's name this new file single.php. And within the new file, let's just type out a bit of random dummy text like hello 123. And if we save this and refresh, here we see that dummy text when we are on the URL for a single post. But if we go back to our home page, we see that it is still powered by index.php. So what this means is that depending on the current URL, WordPress will be on the lookout for different file names in our theme folder. So our homepage uses index.php, but then if we click on one of these single posts, WordPress will look within our theme folder for a file specifically named single.php. If that file doesn't exist, then WordPress will use index.php as a universal default fallback. Okay, but having said all of that, let's get back to the task at hand. Remember, on this screen, we just want to show the blog post title and the content, but we don't want the title to be a link like it is on the home page. So here's what we can do. Back in our text editor, let's go back into our index.php file and let's select and copy the entire contents into our clipboard. And then let's go back into single.php and let's delete this dummy text and then paste in our clipboard. And now let's simply remove the A tags that surround the title. So let's delete the closing tag and let's delete the opening tag here. And now let's go ahead and save and refresh. Cool. So now on the home page, each headline is a link, but then once you click on one of those, since you're already on the detail screen, there's no need for the headline to be a link. Cool. And we can adjust our single.php file further to maybe remove this horizontal rule line because there's no need to separate the content from anything below it. So back in our text editor, let's delete that HR element. Perfect. Okay, now at this point, let's change gears. So far in this lesson, we've been working with posts, but WordPress also has pages. So for example, let's jump back into the WordPress admin dashboard, and in the left-hand sidebar, let's click on Pages. And we could try to work with this sample page, but just to make sure everyone's on the same page, why don't we use the Add New button to create a new page. Let's give it a dummy title like Test Page 123. And then for the content, let's just include a bit of dummy lorem ipsum text. Then go ahead and publish or save the page. Okay, and now you'll notice this permalink here. You can always click this to preview the page. Cool, so that takes me to a screen with only the content for that one page. And if we look in the URL bar, we can see the slug for that page. However, even though this screen only displays information for that one single page, we see that the headline is still a link, which means that this URL and this screen is being powered by index.php instead of single.php. And that's because WordPress only uses the single.php file for individual posts. For individual pages, WordPress looks in our theme folder for a file named page.php. So why don't we go and create that file right now? So back in our theme folder, let's create a new file. Let's name it page.php. And instead of typing out the loop code again, why don't we just go into single.php, copy all of this into our clipboard, and then paste that into the new page.php. And just to prove to ourselves that this is indeed the file being used, maybe right above this heading level 2, why don't we create a heading level 1 that says, this is a page, not a post. Let's save this, refresh. Cool, so we see this, which proves that we're using page.php. Here's the title and the content. If we go back to just fictionaluniversity.dev homepage, this is powered by index.php. And if we click on one of the blog posts, this screen is powered by single.php. So the important concept for this lesson is that depending on the URL you visit, WordPress is going to use different files in your theme folder to control what you see on the screen here. And even though we have these different files like page, index, and single, they all have one very important thing in common, and that is that they all use the famous loop, which is this general pattern of doing something once for each item in a collection, even if that collection only has one item in it. Okay, but in the WordPress universe, the loop is a famous term. Any WordPress developer will know what you're talking about if you mention the loop. The loop is at the heart and soul of WordPress, and it's something that we will use again and again throughout this course. Now that's actually going to bring this lesson to a close. In our next lesson, we will learn how to create a global or universal header and footer. Should be a lot of fun. Let's keep it rolling, and I will see you then.